You know that feeling that everyone's ignoring something obvious? Like there's something terrible right there, screaming in people's faces, but they just choose not to see it? Some people think that camping alone is either something only crazy folks do, or something you do when you're running from something. Maybe it was a bit of both for me. But there are people who feel more at ease surrounded by trees than by people. It's not that I dislike people, it's just they have a way of making everything complicated. The forest, on the other hand, is honest. Or at least, I used to think it was. First of all, let me be clear. I was never one of those guys who believed in conspiracy theories or forest curses. I work in environmental logistics. I've camped in over 20 nature reserves across the U.S., and I've always seen myself as a practical man. But what I saw that night, it wasn't practical, it wasn't natural, and it wasn't human. I just wanted a few days away from the city noise, the work pressure, and everything else that had slowly pushed me into a constant state of alert. The kind of tiredness that doesn't go away with sleep. A knot in the throat with no name. So when I found that half-forgotten state park up north, with barely any infrastructure and almost no visitors, it seemed perfect. The air had that scent of damp earth and decay that, for me, has always been more comforting than any incense. I set up camp near a shallow creek, far from the main trails. I grabbed a printed map at the park entrance, marked my location using my phone's GPS, though the signal was laughably weak, and got ready for 2 or 3 days of pure silence. On the morning of the second day, I woke up to a thick fog covering everything. Not unusual in that region, but the density of it made me hesitate. Still, I decided to walk a bit, explore the surroundings. I packed a small backpack, flashlight, water bottle, pocket knife, and started walking along the edge of the creek. It didn't take even half an hour before I realized I was entering an area that wasn't on the map. The trail looked old, almost forgotten, covered in leaves and exposed roots. It felt like no one had walked through there in a long time. But something pulled me in. Maybe the idea of finding a place untouched, or maybe just that dumb curiosity that pushes us toward the kind of place we really shouldn't be going near. The forest sounds began to shift as I went deeper. The bird song faded, slowly. Then came the faint rustling in the bushes. At first I thought it was just my imagination, but it wasn't. With every step I could feel it. There was more than just trees watching me. The humidity increased. The ground grew softer, almost swampy in some spots, and the temperature felt like it had dropped a few degrees. That's when I saw it. A stone arch covered in moss, hidden behind a wall of massive ferns. It wasn't natural. That thing had been placed there a long, long time ago, and it was strange. Too symmetrical, too geometric, like someone had built it with an impossible kind of obsession. And of course I stepped through. Beyond that arch, the forest felt different. The trees stood closer together, with branches twisted into each other as if they were trying to block the light. And it wasn't just the light that vanished. It was sound, too. Not the comforting silence of an open field, but a kind of vacuum, like the air itself had grown too thick to carry noise. My steps on the leaf litter were muffled. My heartbeat, now pounding, was the only sound reminding me I was still there, still alive. I kept walking, even though every part of my body screamed to turn back. Something ahead kept pulling my eyes forward, like an invisible line tied to the center of my chest. The trees seemed to lean inward. It wasn't the forest surrounding me. It felt like it was closing behind me, slowly, deliberately. My feet sank deeper. The ground was wet, spongy. And then I noticed that sweet, metallic smell. It wasn't just damp soil, it was flesh and blood. A familiar scent, but deeply out of place. Still, I kept going. I know I should have turned around, but it felt like it was already too late. At some point, the forest wouldn't let me leave. And the worst part, I didn't want to leave. I needed to know. A few steps ahead, a clearing opened between the twisted trees. In the center, a tall stone, covered in dark lichen. It looked like an altar. But what made my stomach twist wasn't the stone. It was what surrounded it. Holes, dozens of them, dug with animalistic precision, like something had crawled out of them. My stomach churned. Not out of disgust, but out of something older. An ancestral kind of recognition you can't explain. Those holes, they weren't old. The soil was still fresh, and something was in it. A dark, thick substance. Not quite mud, not quite blood. Something in between. And then, I saw it. For a second. No more than that. Between two trees, something moved. Tall, thin, bending the wrong way, silent and fast. My flashlight died. If there's one thing I learned in that forest, it's that fear comes in phases. It's not just a quick scare and then it's over. No, it's a cycle. Like a fever that rises, steadies, and then drops you hard. The next morning, no one wanted to talk about what happened. It was like everyone was waiting for someone else to break the silence, but no one had the guts to go first. Even the loudest ones had turned into ghosts of themselves. The whole group looked numb, or clinging to denial like a kid covering their ears to block out the thunder. We tried to stick to the original plan. Quick breakfast, light hiking, maybe even a swim. The problem was, the forest felt different. Not just because of what happened the night before. It was like it knew we'd seen too much. Like something was watching us closely, silently. With every step, the feeling that someone was walking right beside us, just out of focus, was unbearable. The sound of branches snapping felt wrong, as if they were being stepped on by something much heavier than us. And once again, not a single animal. No birds, no insects. Just that dry wind slipping through the trees like a whisper soaked in anger. Around early afternoon, we heard a sharp crack like heavy wood breaking. We ran toward the sound and found one of the tents torn open. It didn't look like an animal had done it. It was as if something with fingers had ripped it from top to bottom in a straight line. The gashes were deep, irregular, and there was a dark slime on the fabric, thick with the stench of rot. I still remember that smell. It was so real it made my stomach turn. It was impossible to ignore. And yet, no one said a word. We just exchanged looks, packed our things, and decided to head back early. Of course, we didn't make it. The path back no longer existed. The markings we'd left on trees had vanished. The trail looked completely different. The trees seemed like they'd moved. Yeah, I know how that sounds. But I swear, everything was off. The turns in the path were wrong. The tree trunks we'd marked were just gone. And the compass spun wildly, non-stop, like a giant magnet was buried beneath our feet, warping everything. Then it started again. The sound. First faint, like slow breathing. But it wasn't human, and it wasn't animal. It was wet, deep, dissonant, like it was coming from the forest itself, like the trunks were breathing. It got closer. A bubbling, moist noise. Something dragging. No one spoke. No one ran. It was like our brains were frozen, like waking up mid-sleep paralysis. All we could do was stare into the shadows between the trees, trying to figure out where the bark ended, and where that thing watching us began. I swear the whole forest held its breath with us, and then we saw it, a silhouette, tall, thin, distorted. It wasn't human, but it stood upright, watching us, motionless, hiding behind a tree, only part of its face visible. One eye, but not a normal eye. It didn't blink. It was shiny, fixed, with something liquid dripping from it, just staring. And then, it disappeared, like it melted into the forest floor. At that point, we didn't even know if we were still awake. Everyone's faces were blank, not out of fear but exhaustion, like the forest was draining our senses, turning our memories into sludge. And then night came, again, much faster than it should have, and with it, the cycle restarted. I lost all sense of time, that second night. But I remember the exact moment I realized the forest had swallowed us. The sky darkened violently. It wasn't a gentle transition from golden to deep blue. It was like someone hit a switch. Suddenly, we were in total darkness, thick darkness, heavy darkness. The flashlight barely cut through a meter ahead. The sound came back, that wet, staggered breathing, closer now. I had a watch with a backlight. It was 6:43 p.m. when we decided to set up camp again, even though we had no clue where we were. And at 7:02 p.m., the first thing happened. We were gathered around the fire, which barely held a flame because of the moisture seeping from the ground. Out of nowhere, crack, then another. Footsteps, heavy ones, but not on the ground, in the trees. I swear, the thing was moving through the branches, but it didn't make sense. Nothing that heavy could move above us with that kind of speed. The canopy creaked, and bits of branches fell as if they were being ripped out. And then, I screamed. But it wasn't human, not animal either. It was something in between, like something trying to imitate a living being's pain, but not quite knowing how to make the sound. It was high-pitched, fractured, and came from everywhere at once. We froze. No one had the strength to run or speak. Everyone's eyes were hollow, like in those movies where the character already knows they're going to die. There was nothing left but waiting. But what came next was worse than any attack. At around 9:20 p.m., the fire went out completely. No wind, no warning. The flame just collapsed. And in that full darkness, the sound stopped. Just for a second. Absolute silence. No breathing forest, no cracks, nothing. And yet, I knew something was there. Then came the smell. Imagine rotten meat left under the sun. Now multiply that by 10. It was damp, putrid. But there was something else in it, chemical, like formaldehyde mixed with old blood. It burned your nose, stung your eyes. You couldn't breathe, without choking. I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. Those who didn't run or faint just sat there, completely still, hoping time would somehow fast forward. What hit me hardest that night wasn't the fear. It was the emptiness. A weird kind of numbness, like my body was still alive, but my mind had slipped out. I saw everything like I was outside myself. The crooked trees, the mist falling from above like natural smoke. The bodies of my teammates either pretending to sleep or just broken. And the weirdest part? That silence never went away. An absolute silence, like the world had stopped. No leaves rustling, no twigs cracking, no animal sounds. The forest felt like a fake backdrop, some poor imitation of nature. Around 5 a.m., the first light started to show through the trees, but it wasn't the sun. It was a grayish, cold glow. The sky looked like it was covered by a thick membrane, like something was blocking the real light. Still, it was enough to get moving. Of the group that had come with me, only 3 of us remained. The other 2 were completely gone mentally. One shook constantly, muttering broken phrases. The other stared into nothing, eyes hollow, like he'd left something behind. Or maybe something had stayed inside him. I decided it was time to leave. We had no idea where we were, but staying meant dying. We grabbed our bags, what was left of the food and water, and started walking. And that's when we noticed the second strange detail. The forest had changed. The trees weren't the same. The trail we followed on the way in simply didn't exist anymore. It wasn't just that we were lost. It was like the entire place had reshaped itself. The trees stood closer together. The ground felt wetter, almost rotten. There were black stains on the trunks, like burn marks, but with no scent of fire. And every now and then, we felt it again, that we were being followed. We saw nothing, but the feeling wouldn't leave, a chill at the base of the neck, the sense that someone was a few steps behind, always stopping when we turned. The forest watched, silent, alive. We walked the entire day, no direction, until we came upon something that made us stop cold. It was a small circular clearing, the ground blanketed in dry leaves. At the center, a structure, something between a stone altar and a sculpture. It looked ancient, very ancient, covered in moss, with strange carvings. Some were spirals, others resembled claw marks, and at the top, a skull, but not from any known animal. It was elongated, with thin, uneven teeth, and only two holes, one where a nose should be, and another, a large hollow in the center of the forehead, as if it had a single eye. In that moment, I wanted to run, but my body locked up. It was in that clearing that I felt something inside me begin to change. Some part of me recognized that place, a buried memory, like I'd been there before, not in this life, or maybe even in this one. The air grew heavy. My lungs burned. The other two started walking around the structure, like they were in a trance. And me, no matter how hard I tried to look away, I kept staring at that altar. The skull, the symbol, then a sound. This time it wasn't the creature. It was human. A branch snapping, heavy breathing. We shouted, we ran. We didn't stop until our bodies couldn't take it anymore. When I looked back, I was alone. They were gone. No screams, no sound, no trace. They just ceased to be. And for the first time, I understood. This wasn't a forest. It was an entity, a sentient being, a living organism watching us like a body choosing which parts to reject. And maybe I'd been spared, or maybe just saved for last, because deep down, it knew I was going to tell. I covered my face with my shirt, trying to choke back the nausea, but the others, they were worse. One dropped to his knees. The other started laughing. That kind of panicked laughter, you know? When the brain doesn't know if it's about to die or lose its mind. And that's when the light appeared. A faint grayish light in the middle of the forest. But it wasn't from a flashlight. There was no clear source. It was like the air itself was glowing. And in the middle of it, the silhouette appeared. This time, it didn't run. It just stood there. The creature was slender, with arms so long they nearly dragged on the ground. Its neck was crooked, the head tilted as if it were too heavy. And that eye. Always that single gleaming eye in the darkness. But now it breathed. You could see the thin skin rising and falling with the rhythm of that awful sound. Then it took a step, just one, and the forest reacted. Branches shifted, leaves rustled without wind, the ground vibrated. One of my companions bolted, vanished into the trees. We never saw him again. The other tried to scream, but fainted first. And me? I didn't move. I just stood there, staring. The creature looked at me, not with anger, not with hunger, but with recognition. Like it knew me, like it was saying, "You know what this is? You've always known." And then it turned around. It walked slowly into the forest, vanished into the shadows. But the smell remained, and that feeling that something inside me had gone with it. Their absence didn't cause immediate panic. It was more like an emotional blackout, like my body had switched into autopilot to survive. I kept walking, one foot in front of the other, as if that alone could keep my mind intact. Then I felt it, a high-pitched whine in my ears, that faint buzzing you get in a soundproof chamber. There was no wind, no breeze, just oppressive silence and that sound coming from inside my own head. And then came the images, at first in flashes, like memories that weren't mine. a figure standing motionless in the forest, a body or shadow that didn't move, but breathed. It looked human, but wasn't. There was something about the stillness that defied the concept of life or death. And there was more. A trail of scorched, symbols carved into the ground like scars burned into the earth itself. These visions came without warning. I'd blink, and for a second I wasn't there anymore. I was somewhere else. A buried place. Stone steps leading underground, ritual sounds, languages I'd never heard before but somehow understood. It felt like I was being pulled into something I wasn't meant to understand. I leaned on a tree. My heart was about to explode. And that's when I saw it. Something that chilled me to the bone. Wedged into the bark of a tree right in front of me was a piece of my own map. Impossible. I'd left the map in the tent. I never took it with me. But there it was, a torn piece, pinned to the wood by a splinter, like a message, like a reminder. You're not getting out. The forest was speaking to me, not with words, but with signs, with symbols. And I kept walking, out of some stupid hope that maybe, at some point, this would all end. That's when I saw it, a structure between the trees. A building? No, a cabin. The first human-made thing since we came in. It was old, built from dark wood, sunken into the soft earth. The windows were boarded up in an X pattern, but the door was slightly ajar. I stood still, staring at that door like it was the last choice I'd ever make. And I walked in. The inside was a single room, an old bed, a table with scattered notebooks, and in the center, a chair turned toward me, empty. But what froze me was the frame on the wall, a photo, black and white. 3 men in uniform standing in front of a clearing. One of them looked exactly like me. Same face, same eyes, just older, maybe 20 years older. On the frame, 1976. I was born in 1991. Logic was gone. Reason had evaporated. Only one truth remained. This wasn't just a cursed forest. It was a loop, a closed system, a living trap that manipulated time, space, and identity. I stepped back outside, and then I saw it. The creature. For the first time, it wasn't hiding. It stood there, between the trees, watching me. It had no eyes, not in the traditional sense, but I felt its gaze piercing my skin. It was tall, taller than any human, its limbs too long, joints wrong, and its skin, if you could call it that, looked like dead moss fused with exposed bone. It didn't move forward, didn't growl, didn't chase. It just observed. And in that moment, I understood. It didn't need to hunt me. I was already inside it, like a parasite, temporarily tolerated. I was now part of that twisted ecosystem. And that permission wasn't permanent. I would either leave or become one of the shadows I'd seen before. So I ran. I left that place. Or at least that's what I like to believe. My body left the forest. My feet carried me back to the dirt road. Eventually, I saw signs of civilization again. Signs. Cars. People. But none of it convinced me I'd truly escaped. Because since then, everything feels off. And I still feel like something came out with me. In the days that followed, I tried to report what happened. No authority paid attention. The missing persons reports for my friends were filed under insufficient evidence. No one mentioned the backward footprints, or the map pinned to the tree, or the creature with the invisible eye. No one wanted to hear about the man in the 1976 photo, who had my face. So I started researching, and what I found was more than I ever expected. Old cases, unexplained disappearances in that same forest, going back decades. Some of them described dreams identical to mine. The tunnel of roots, the symbols on the ground, the cabin with eternal candles. All scattered, fragmented, but there. As if the forest leaves subtle traces only for those it has already swallowed. Others who came back like I did either went insane or vanished again. And the few who remained eventually disappeared from the internet, from public life, from any record at all. It's like they were erased on purpose. So here's my advice. If you ever hear about that forest, or if someone invites you to a disconnected camping trip, think twice. It might look like just another remote, quiet spot. But sometimes, that's exactly the kind of place designed to trick you. Because it doesn't reveal itself with loud monsters or sudden attacks. It waits. It tests you. And if you're the kind of person who carries doubts, fears, or cracks in your mind, it slips through those cracks and reshapes everything. Sometimes I wonder, what if I'm still there? What if this whole escape is just a simulation, some kind of comfort manufactured by the forest itself to keep me calm? While it slowly feeds on my sanity? Maybe you think I've lost it. Maybe I have. But if one day, while you're alone, in the woods, or even inside your house at night, you hear a faint humming in your ears, followed by the scent of wet wood and ancient soil, run and never, never look directly at it. Because if it realizes you saw it, it won't let you leave, ever again. If you've ever experienced something weird, creepy, or just plain bizarre at work, send it to us. Here, your trauma might just become content. And hey, it's cheaper than therapy. Drop it in the comments. Who knows? Your story might be the next one we turn into a script. Don't forget to like and follow our channel for more stories like this one. See you in the next story.